No, you don't need the.
I'm doing this, by the way. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend.
Talking on it though, then
He a
you can't bring it up later.
Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items.
What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and in today's video we are going to talk about the beasts in the East, the best teams in the East. We're going to take a look at what happened in the LPL the past couple of days. We are going to talk about next week's matches in the LCK, as well as the upcoming matches in the LPL before the Chinese New Year break. And then we are going to take a look at my combined rankings for the teams that are in the LPL and the LCK. So first, let's take a look at some of the matches we've had so far. The first game of the split was FPX against Team World Elite. This was a pretty surprising match from the perspective of World Elite coming out on top. I do think that FPX will be a better team long term. I like some of the younger players that are on FPX. World Elite was a little bit surprising, which had some people, including Cajal, asking the question, like, are Team World Elite a dark horse for the LPL? The answer is no, they are not. Their team is not strong enough to be competitive with the upper echelon teams in the LPL. If by dark horse he means can sneak into playoffs, then maybe, but I don't have much interest in those kinds of teams. I still think that both of these teams are C tier, which means that they have mostly league average players. Not enough difference makers. Maybe some of those players have the potential to be very good, but just nothing crazy so far. In the first game, the draft went really well for Team World Elite, and they invaded really well. They played off of their advantage they got from draft pretty well. In the second game, we saw Care have a huge performance on Kassadin, which isn't completely surprising. There were some really good matches for him last year. Not that level of carry for the most part, but that's possible, I guess. So we have to take that into consideration in the future. And then in the third game, World Elite won again. Cassante seems like a really good champion so far. And that's basically it for World Elite and FPX. I don't have anything that's changing. My opinion is not changing on either of those teams yet. Anyone's Legend against Invictus Gaming. This was a pretty big surprise to me. Invictus Gaming didn't have their starting mid laner Dove, but they were still able to pull off the win over Anyone's Legend. So, that's not a good sign for Anyone's Legend. I'm very close to downgrading them because this is the kind of game that they should be winning. And Invictus Gaming might be, better than people are giving them credit for, including myself. But like I said, going into the match, the most important player was going to be Gideon, and Gideon had a pretty solid performance overall. YSKM had a pretty good match as well, and his name supposedly means "you should know me." That is one of the coolest names in League of Legends, if that's true. On and Wink still playing well together in the bot lane. So yeah, the one thing I will say about Anyone's Legend is their first draft in particular was very difficult to execute. There are not many engage options on that, and apparently Graves is a champion that is playable right now, but a lot of teams think that it's not very good. I like Graves in general as a champion. I'd like to see one of the better teams play it and see how that goes. Then we had BLG against JDG. JDG, the best team in my mind right now in the world. They had a pretty tough match against BLG, which is not completely surprising. I do have BLG inside my top 10 in the world right now. I don't like seeing Kanavi on Maokai, but it is what it is. Second game, BLG picks up a win, which again, they're a strong team. Am I shocked that they took a map? No, I suggested betting that in my last video, I believe. And then game 3, JDG came out on top. Let's keep moving. LGD against Rare Atom. This was a win for Rare Atom, going 2-1. Again, not very surprising that LGD was able to pick up a win in one game. I think that LG is probably the worst team in the LPL, but Rare Atom is only a C tier team, so going 2-1 is not very surprising in that match, in that kind of matchup. Then we had RNG against OMG, and RNG is a good team. They didn't have Angel, who I believe will be their starting mid laner for the rest of the split. We had another Graves performance, so that's a little bit more like what you'd expect. Having the huge tempo advantage in the beginning and farming very well, forcing the enemy team to kind of play more aggressive. And RNG came out on top there. And then again, I do like OMG a lot. I think that this is going to create an opportunity to bet on OMG in the future in one of their next matches. So we should watch out for that. Then we have Ultra Prime against Ninjas in Pajamas. Pajamas. And, it's the former V5 squad, so I'm not very surprised that they were able to pick up the win. I think that they are a B team, and I think that Ultra Prime is a C team. That was reflected in my rankings going into the split. Invincible, I guess, is going to be the starter more often than Rich, which is totally fine. Xiaolong Bao, I think XLB is Xiaolong Bao in Chinese. I think that's what you're supposed to say. And then Fotik and Zhuo. So it's a good squad. I mean, you have multiple players that were already there. Xiaolong Bao, Fotik, and Zhuo. Xiaolong Bao and Fotik were both already there. I think Invincible might have been there as well too, but he wasn't playing as much. I think that you'll be able to depend on the jungle and ADC to get things going for that team. I don't have high expectations for Ultra Prime. They're another team that I might consider downgrading because I just don't like the idea of having Ning and Baolan as starters at this point. It just doesn't seem like a good idea to me. Then we had World Elite up against EDG. So this was a trap, obviously. World Elite coming out in their first match, people probably thought to themselves, oh, maybe they are actually good and they have a chance against EDG. The first game was relatively close from the kill score perspective, but overall, I think that it was somewhat apparent that EDG was just a little bit better. I do think that EDG is an A-tier team, so we should expect these teams to be able to sweep at a pretty high rate. At least more often than you'd expect for a 1-tier differential. Nothing too crazy here. Maokai seeing a lot of play still, which is consistent from Worlds, but a lot has changed since then, so I'm kind of surprised. I guess the jungle changes were very good for him. And then last but not least, we have Top Esports against Anyone's Legend. So Top Esports, obviously one of the better teams. One of the better teams in China. After watching that performance, I think that Top Esports might be a little overrated. I don't think I'm going to like them against a lot of the other top teams. I'm going to be looking for better betting opportunities to bet against Top Esports. So let's take a look at the next couple of matches. These ones are happening tomorrow. So we have Thunder Talk against LNG. This is a very interesting matchup to me. We have it at even money. So Hoya against Zika, I prefer Zika. Tarzan against Beishuan, I prefer Tarzan. Scout against Yukal, I prefer Scout. Huanfeng and Xinlu against LP and Hong. I prefer Huanfeng and Xinlu in that spot. I think that LNG is the better side, which is why it's surprising that it's even money. I think that you kind of have to go for LNG in this spot, even though it's even money. And then on DraftKings, LNG is actually the lower priced team out of these two, which gives you some stacking options with the second match, which is RNG against Invictus Gaming. So if Invictus Gaming can back up their other performance with a strong showing against RNG, even if it's not a win, I think that will have some positive takeaways for Invictus Gaming. They do have upside, and again, it's because they're bringing in younger players, lesser known players, and that gives your team upside because we don't know what those players' ceilings are for the most part. So Breathe against YSKM. I think that Breathe is one of the best top laners in the world, so I prefer him. Wei against Gideon. I would assume that Gideon is just better than Wei at this point. I don't have a high opinion of Wei overall. Dove against Tongyuan. So I don't think Angel's playing until after the Chinese New Year. Then we have Gala and Bunny against On and Wink. I'd probably prefer On and Wink as a bot lane at this point. I know a lot of people have a high opinion of Gala. I think he is overrated, but at the same time he's still Gala. You have to have some respect for him. So maybe that does lean a little bit RNG's way. But it's interesting. Like, it's funny because talking through that matchup, I would almost want to rate Invictus Gaming as a B level team. Like, maybe I'll have to do that. Maybe I'll have to drop anyone's legend down a little bit, increase IG a little bit, and this will be an important match for my future rankings of these teams. And then we have 2 more matches before the end of play for like 2 weeks. I think they take a break. It picks back up on January 30th. So we have BLG against FPX. I'll take BLG in that matchup. And then Weibo Gaming against Top Esports. I'll take Weibo Gaming in that spot. So RNG against Invictus Gaming. Invictus Gaming plus 550. I think you almost want to take a shot there. Plus 1.5 at 150. That's pretty surprising. I think you could definitely do that. Because then if they win one match, if they win one game in the match tomorrow morning, you win your bet. So I think that's actually a pretty good bet. Then BLG against FPX. I do think BLG will beat FPX. I don't really care about the spread in this situation. I wouldn't be betting the spread. I would just bet money line minus 350. That means you have to bet 350 to win 100. And then we have Weibo Gaming against Top Esports. Weibo Gaming at plus 125. I'll take that. I think that's a pretty good spot for Weibo Gaming. King Tian played today over Wayward. So the Shy against either one of those players, I'll take the Shy personally. I know some people will want Wayward, but I prefer the Shy. Then we have Karsa against Tian. I prefer Karsa. We have Xiaohu against Rookie. I think I still prefer Xiaohu slightly, but they're both very good mid laners. You can't really go wrong in that spot. And then we have Light and Crisp against Jackie, Love, and Mark. And again, I almost want to go Light in this situation. I know that Jackie Love is the bigger name. Jackie Love is very volatile and had a good match today, but against lesser competition. So some people will see that and be like, oh, he had like a 12 kill performance this week. Like, you need to bet on Jackie Love to continue playing well. That's really not how it works in my mind. So I'm fine going against that. And that's it for the LPL. Let's go into the LCK. So we're going to do all of these games right here. And then we'll get into some rankings. So let me just switch this up. So in the LCK, we have Damwon against DRX. And Damwon's logo looks insane. Where is it? You see this thing? It's like Oakley. Like, did they just get Oakley as a sponsor? I don't understand. So why did that not work? All right, Damwon, I have them as one of the best teams in Korea. DRX, I do not think will be one of the best teams in Korea. I think you can bet the minus 275 and be pretty comfortable. DRX did make some upgrades to their roster, in my opinion, and we'll talk about that later on. T1 against Gen G. I think that Gen G could easily be taking a step backwards, but I do have some faith in Gen G to kind of be able to fill in talent. So in the bot lane, they have Pays and Delight now. I think that they will be able to make it work. I don't think that's going to be good enough against a team like T1. I do prefer T1 in this spot, but plus 240 is kind of insane to me. If you wanted to take a shot at plus 240, I wouldn't blame you at all. Then we have Kwangdong Freaks against Homolife. I think Homolife is really good. I think you definitely have to go Homolife in that spot. Nongshim against Fredit Brion. I think that Fredit Brion's a little overrated at that point. That's kind of surprising. I forget who they got for jungle and mid lane. That might change my mind. Fredit Brion, Raptor, and Karis. That's kind of surprising. So let's see. Nongshim. So, bunch of nobodies. So I don't like any of those teams. Those 3 teams I just kind of threw together in my power rankings. So, don't love that. I mean, at plus 162, it's funny because it's plus 162, but the spread is plus 1.5 minus 200. It doesn't seem to make sense, really. Probably a match I'm going to stay away from. I don't have a good enough feeling for any of those teams. T1 against KT. Some people are talking up KT. I'll happily take T1. I'm not playing minus 700, though. Sandbox against Damwon. That is a spot where I think you might just want to bet on Sandbox plus 1.5. I think that they have a very talented roster. So we'll take a look at that. in the next part of the video. Genji against DRX. Genji, I think, will slap DRX. Fred Brion against Kwangdong. And again, I don't know enough about these teams. You might want to bet on Kwangdong Freaks before Fred Brion's first match, because if Nongshim comes out and upsets Fred Brion, that will change people's opinion on Fred Brion. Maybe that's a good opportunity there. And then we have Sandbox against Homalife. So again, this is a spot where you'd probably want to bet on Sandbox before the Damwon match if you think they have a chance to keep that match close. That will have a big impact on this number. Minus 1,200 is kind of huge. Sandbox, I think, just has some good talent, good young talent. Like I said, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Then we have KT Rolster and Nongshim. So KT Rolster and Nongshim, I think that KT Rolster is just much better than Nongshim. So I think that's a pretty easy one. And again, you might want to, if you have any interest in betting them minus 1.5, you should probably do that before their first match, before Nongshim's first match, because if they look bad, it's going to inflate this number. So let's move this onto this screen, and we will be taking a look at the combined rankings. So this is what I have in my sheet right now. This isn't every team. I'm just selecting the 2 regions that we want to talk about. And we will start from let's just do it this way. Let's start with the D tier. So in the D tier, we have LGD, Nongshim, Kwangdong, and Fred Brion. I don't really want to talk about any of those teams. Let's move into the C tier. In the C tier, we have World Elite, who, they had a good match. Some people will want to start rating them higher. I think that we should be pretty cautious with this team. I think we should actually switch this. So 15, 16, 33, 34. So we're going to make that change live. Invictus Gaming. I could see Invictus Gaming and World Elite both moving up. I'm going to highlight both of those teams, actually, just to keep an eye on them. I could easily see them both getting over FPX and Rare Elite because of younger players that I'm interested in seeing progress. I know that Dove isn't a younger player, but Gideon has a lot of upside as a jungler, which is pretty exciting. And then FPX, Shallow, Howye, Care, LWX, and Lily don't really have any interest there. And then Rare Adam. Rare Adam is not a very exciting team in my mind overall. I do like Leon. I just, it's just not exciting. Doesn't get the juices flowing, if you know what I mean. Let's go to the B tier. So in the B tier, we have DRX. And DRX, I'm kind of on the border. They might be a C tier team, which means they're mostly league average players. Beryl is a good player. Diakdom is a good player. Fate is a pretty good player. Kroko is a pretty good player. Rascal is a pretty good player. I think that it is better than league average for that reason, but who knows what it's going to look like once they all take the Rift together. If they don't have enough playmaking upside, like I know that they do have that through Beryl, but you probably need Kroko and Fate to dominate the early and mid games for them to have a good chance against the upper echelon teams. And if they don't do that consistently, it'll be tough to differentiate them from the other lower level teams. So when they're playing against the top 4 teams, you're not going to want to touch them. But against all the lower tier teams, you might feel comfortable betting on them, playing them on DraftKings, etc. Then we have Ninjas in Pajamas. So Invincible, Shaolin Bao, Dream, Photic, Zhuo. Pretty interesting lineup. I'm not sure how much upside they really have. I definitely think they're better than anyone's Legend at this point. I could see them getting up above a team like Thunder Talk, but that remains to be seen. KT Rolster. So we have Keen, Cuz, BDD, Aiming, and Lehens. Interesting roster, a lot of good name recognition, and I'm sure that's why a lot of people have KT and DRX rated higher than Sandbox, but I think that Sandbox's upside is higher because of the level of talent and pedigree that they have, especially on the top half of the map. Birdall, Willer, Closer, I think, is a very good combo, and they could surprise a lot of people. This split, Thunder Talk, we'll see what they look like today. Hoya, Beishuan, Yukal, Huanfeng, Shinlu. I love Huanfeng. I think he's a very good AD carry. It'd be really interesting to see him on a legit team. But, he was on Suning. They made that good run. But wasn't able to kind of back it up because the LPL is pretty tough if you're not one of the most elite teams in the world. Then we have OMG. OMG, they did lose their first match, but I have a high opinion of most of these players. I don't like Aki very much. I think that they could definitely upgrade in the jungle, and it would benefit them very much long term. I think that's supposed to say 18. And then, like I said before, Sandbox, Birdall, Willer, Closer, Envy, and Kale. Roughly 19 years old on average. Very young team. Closer is another player who is thought of to be a like the heir to Faker's throne for T1, similar to somebody like Zika. I don't know if he will end up being as good as Faker, or if he will have the upside of winning a world championship like Zika did. But a lot of people had very high opinion of Closer. That's not going to go away overnight. I think that he still has the elite upside. It'll be interesting to see how this split plays out for Closer. And then let's do a little bit of a refresh. So we've gone through the first set of teams, and then now we probably have about 10 more teams that we're going to be going through, starting in the A tier. So in the A tier, we have BLG, RNG, and EDG, all from the LPL. Let's start from the bottom. So EDG, Ale, Jai, Fofo, Leave, and Mako. A good team overall. I'm afraid that they might be a little overrated, especially against some of the high upside young teams that we've already talked about, like a team like Invictus Gaming or OMG. I could see them having good matches against EDG in the future, and it really wouldn't surprise me. Those are the kinds of opportunities that I'm looking for, because they should be slight dogs going into those matches. If they ever become a large underdog in any of those situations, I will be betting on them. Next up, we have RNG. So we have Breathe, Way, Angel, Gala, and Bunny. I think that RNG will be good this year. I think that Breathe and Angel and Gala are all, good players. So I'm a little on the fence because we have seen those types of teams meet a lot of resistance. Like if they lose against a lot of the top teams, which I would expect them to lose against a lot of the top teams, and then if they also drop a match or two against some B tier teams or C tier teams, now you're looking at a borderline playoff team. Like Angel, I do like. I don't love Angel. Like when Angel was on Suning, and then Weibo Gaming, I thought they did have really good matches, but also some poor matches, similar to Fofo. So I'm not surprised that I have Angel and Fofo in a similar tier of their teams, because I think that they are somewhat limiting factor against the upper echelon teams. And then we have BLG. I think that BLG has really high upside this year. Bin, Shun, Yagao, Elk, and On. And again, Yagao is somewhat of a limiting factor, but it's not going to be his job to carry the games for the most part. It'll be somebody else's job to do that, and then Yagao will always be in a relatively predictable, consistent spot, and will do his job in the mid and late game. But sometimes you'd have to be a little concerned against an upper echelon mid laner. Do they get blown out of the water in the early game? Definitely possible. Now let's talk about the S- teams. So these are, what I would consider borderline elite teams. I don't love these teams. I think that they do have some deficiencies and some question marks surrounding their team for this year. So Genji, I think we have a pretty solid roster overall, returning most of the same squad. Doran, Peanut, Chovy, Pays, Delight. So it was Ruler and Lehens. They both moved to different organizations. That is a little bit concerning, but I think that Genji probably anticipated that and had Pays ready to go in the background, because Ruler is the type of player who is getting older, but is still a very good AD carry. Ruler, Viper, two of the best AD carries in the world. You really can't go wrong with like a high quality Korean AD carry. So would I be shocked if Genji took a slight step backwards because Ruler is not as good as Pays, or Pays is not as good as Ruler, sorry. That wouldn't surprise me very much, but at the same time, this might be the way to get Chovy unlocked even more. Not having Ruler should put more focus on to Chovy. But like I said, if Genji ended up this year as an A-tier team where, there are a few teams in the LCK that are much better, the two teams that are in the higher tier, if they are much better, then maybe it's really only a 2 or 3 horse race. Maybe Genji is like the 4th, sixth best team. I think that would surprise some people, but not everyone. Next up in the LCK, we have Hanwha Life at the 6th spot in the world. So we have Kingen, Clid, Zika, Viper, Life. Pretty awesome roster. Kingen, Zika, Viper, very good. Life, big question mark in my mind. Clid, good player, but we haven't seen it for a year or two, so we do need to verify that he is still a good player, like a very good player. And if he is a very good player, then Hanwha Life should have no problem getting the Worlds. If he struggles a little bit, I would expect to see them make a change in the jungle at some point this year, because this is a team that they want to win now. And every team wants to win now, but they're investing into this team. Kingen, Zika, Viper, you don't make those kinds of moves without being all in or prepared to double down. So next up, we have Top Esports. And I do think that Top Esports is in danger of being a little bit overrated. Wayward, Tian, Rookie, Jackie Love, Mark, pretty good players. The reason why I say potentially overrated is because I was watching the broadcast yesterday, and they were talking about, Rookie and Jackie Love back on the same squad for the first time since their World Championship days with Invictus Gaming. On that team, the Shy and Rookie were really the better players. Jackie Love had a pretty good Worlds, but he was not the focal point of the team. The solo laners were really the deciding factor, and the reason why Invictus Gaming completely dominated. But since that time, Jackie Love has kind of taken that opportunity and kind of ran with it. People do love watching him play. He's very aggressive, which is an awesome thing to watch. In League of Legends, you do need to have that killer instinct, and Jackie Love definitely has that, but sometimes that makes him a little too aggressive. Wasn't able to get it done last year at Worlds, so there are question marks for this roster, but returning 4 to 5 and then going from Knight to Rookie. I mean, theoretically, Rookie might be a better fit with this roster. Maybe you're better off having Rookie, who is more willing to take the back seat at this point and allows Jackie Love to kind of play even more aggressive than he normally does. Could that work out? Maybe. If a couple months from now we're sitting here and Top Esports wins the league, am I going to be totally shocked? No. It takes a couple of good matches and they could be the winners, but I don't expect them to win. The number 2 team in the LPL, the number 4 team in the world is Weibo Gaming. The Shy, Karsa, Xiaohu, Light, Crisp. They are getting a little bit older, 23, 24, so we still have probably 3 years, theoretically 2 to 3 years, where this roster could stick together and be competitive, like very competitive, upper echelon. I do think there is some young talent in China that will kind of keep pushing these players out of the system a little bit. Some people are already questioning, is Karsa good enough long-term to compete internationally right now? And I think it's probably a little overblown. People are saying they have the backup Kenny Chan, and maybe if Weibo Gaming struggles at any point during the season, that they will bench Karsa and go to Kenny. I don't think that we're going to get to that point. The team is just too stacked. The Shy is still surprisingly young. I think he's only 22, 23 years old, but everybody thinks, he won a world championship a couple years ago. He's old. He's over the hill. He's still way too young for that. Maybe motivation is a problem for him, but I think he's too egotistical to not continue pushing to be the best in the world, and he's just naturally one of the best players in the world. Then we have the S tier team. We have T1. I think that obviously Zeus, Owner, Faker, Gumayusi, and Keria, arguably the best support in the world, arguably one of the best top laners in the world. I didn't think that Gumayusi had a great Worlds. Faker is, the best player of all time. Is he the best player in the world right now? Definitely not, but he is more than serviceable as a mid laner for a team with championship aspirations. I hope that T1 is as aggressive and hungry as they were last year, because we should expect to see T1 making a deep run at Worlds, getting to the semifinals, and hopefully getting Keria a shot at redemption. That is like a heartbreaking image from the World Finals when Keria was crying. One of my favorite players, arguably my favorite player in the world right now, Keria. Love to watch elite support players, especially when they're willing to be hyper aggressive. And watching Keria on those types of champions is definitely the most interesting. those are the games that I like to watch the most. However, I think that we have a better team in Korea, and I think that team is Damwon Gaming. So with Kana, Canyon, Showmaker, Deft, Kellen, we have an interesting squad. The reason I say interesting is because Canyon and Showmaker are obviously, in my mind, the best jungle mid duo in the world. Actually, no, they were the best jungle mid duo in the world. And it's close between them and the top jungle mid duo in the world. We can talk about that in a different video potentially. Kana, I think, is underrated at this point somehow. People think that he goes from being one of the best top laners one of the best carry top laners in the world with T1 to having a bad year because Nongshim is garbage, and then they want to say like, oh, Kana's not good. That's not how League of Legends works. Kana is still a very good top laner. I'd be shocked if he held back this Damwon team. Canyon and Showmaker, great, like I already said. Deft coming off of his world championship. Deft does not need to be the best player on this team, which is great for him at this point because he wasn't the best player on DRX either. Zika was definitely the best player. Piosik, I know that he didn't have a great finals, and a great semifinals, I guess, but Piosik was the life and soul of that DRX team. And I think that without Piosik, it would have been impossible for them to get to that point because his champion pool and playstyle really allowed DRX to bring Kingen and Zika along throughout the year. So I don't want to like completely get rid of all of the positive attributes that Piosik had just because he had a bad finals. And some people were killing him about finals and saying that he was like trying to sabotage his team. Like not actually, but that's what they were saying as a joke. And then, the only real question mark with this team is Kellen, but I think Kellen will be fine. And that leaves us with only one tier and one team left. And that is, of course, JDG. JDG is the best team in the world. I really don't think it's debatable. I know that in their match against BLG, they ended up giving up one game, but that doesn't scare me at all. 369, Kanavi Knight, Ruler missing. An amazing squad. I think that this team is going to be so good for the entire year. If they didn't make it to semifinals at Worlds, I would honestly be shocked. The only way that happens is if they show up against Damwon or T1, Weibo Gaming, Top Esports in like the quarterfinals from an unlucky draw. That's the only way that I could see a team like this not making it to the semifinals at Worlds. If 369 takes a huge step backwards, maybe that's something that could happen. But Kanavi is the best jungler in the world in my mind. Ruler is one of the 2 best AD carries. Knight is one of the 5 best mid laners. Missing is a top 10 support for sure. So I think when you have that level of talent around your team, it's very difficult for you to kind of mess up. We've seen some super teams fail in the past, specifically in the West. And that's because the players aren't that good. Like if you take a bunch of pretty good players and you put them on the same roster and then you send them to an international competition, well, guess what? If those players from JDG were in any other region in the world, they would probably be the best player in their role in each position. Like maybe if you put Knight in the LCK, there's still a debate. If you put 369 in the LCK, there's still a debate. But if you take any of these players and put them in the West, they're probably the best players in their roles in the world, and that's kind of why you have the beasts in the East and you have the best of the rest, aka the West. So that's basically it. I think that as time goes on, I will start making changes to this, but it's tough right now to make too many changes because we've only had a couple of matches in the LPL. There are some things that will force me to make some changes, specifically things like watching anyone's Legends come out flat. Invictus Gaming have a pretty surprising start to the season. And like it's like Gideon. Like those are the kinds of players you want to see them early on performing well, and then that they have that upside against these upper echelon teams where that's where you're really going to find value on the betting markets. And you can try to get in early on some of these players with good futures bets or good, spread bets and stuff like that. But that's basically it for today. I'm probably going to start making videos about once a week, maybe twice a week, depending on what I'm like inspired to make a video about. But I'll probably make one for the East, one for the West, and maybe an additional video just to kind of keep it separate because that's kind of where most people's brains are for like paying attention to this stuff. And then once you get to the international competitions, you can kind of blend everything together. But like I said, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.